So how can I teach you to get through Naxx from a raid roster prep perspective of doing raid assignments? I think that it's really a tandem thing to explain raid assignments. In order to do that, you have to explain roster and what you expect from a roster. So this is me posting a roster every single week. I just use an old GDKP thing that I haven't really updated. I also host GDKP Naxxes, so there's kind of back and forth between the synergy there where like I'm just not worried too much about the details, right? Every other host they burn out because they put a whole bunch of effort into things. And my advice is to take things simply and scale up from that. We're going to look at a lot of high level detail, but before we get into that high level detail, let's just talk about basics, right? So you need a couple gigatanks. I like to have three Fury Prots or two Fury Prots and a Feral. You need to have at least 5 to 6 decurses at a minimum. So in this raid here, I have 4 mages and 1 druid. 5 decurses total is really the minimum that I like to bring. You can do it with 4, that's what speedruns will have, but very risky. I like to bring 5 or 6. So yeah, couple gigatanks, a total of 6 tanks is what I bring. For a slightly lower tier raid, you want to have 7 tanks. 12 healers is what I have for Alliance here. And the key with Alliance is just how powerful it is to have extra priests, a priest for every single melee group, so that you have a lot of healing throughput with Prayer of Heal is really, really powerful. Combined then with 4 paladins. 1 paladin, each healing the 4 main tanks. Throughout most of Naxx, at most you're going to have 3 or 4 people taking damage. Most of Naxx is melee damage that you're getting hit by, so as long as you are understanding who is taking that melee damage and when, you can heal through most of Naxx pretty simply. Again, just to give a little bit of background, I've had multiple raids now that no one has died in Naxx. Um, no one else can say that. So again, not to toot my horn too much, but I just do the basics, okay? I don't have the fastest raids. I have some people in my raids that have been in the fastest raids though. And they sometimes prefer my raids where we don't do anything super fancy, right? We just get to blast at a medium pump and it's just easy and reliable. So my assignments are super, super simple. I don't really care about much of the synergy here. All this stuff at the top, I never end up filling in. The people that are playing this game in my raids, I just let them do their thing. So let's just talk about that real quick when it comes to like letting people do their thing. Imp EA, Fairy Fire, Curse of Wreck, Demo Shout, Piercing Howl. That's like a really, really small thing. Um, right here we have PIs, bops, mage buffs, arcane intellect, priest buffs, all that kind of stuff. I just expect people to do it themselves. So, do I have some loss from that? Probably. But I try and keep things as simple as possible. And it's at this point in the game where a lot of times you have different class leads. Like I have the paladins that are always within tier of 1 paladin. One guy is setting up the pally power and is managing that. One mage is managing all the mages so that they all know their mage rotation. One warlock is in charge of the summons and healthstones, right? Like you need to have a raid that is having synergy, and trying to stack all of that into an assignment sheet is something that you just can lose if you understand the level of people that you're bringing that might not really care about that level of detail, right? So the level of detail that I expect in my raids is quite low. We don't have that high of expectations, so then when we beat expectations, it's great. Let me just go ahead and put my ugly mug over here. and we'll just get into this more. So again, I have 6 tanks. We have most assignments that are Skull through Moon, 1 through 4 right there. And then 1 paladin on each of the main tanks. We have 2 off tanks that each have a priest healing them, or we'll often have the resto druid. So again, a optimal comp is having that 4 paladin, 7 priest. You don't need that though. Oftentimes I have either 5 paladins or 2 resto druids instead of 7 priests. You have 6 priests. You can go down to 5 priests, but having 6 or more priests for Saffron and KT is really nice. And in general, just throughout the raid, at least having 5 or 6 priests just gives you a lot of power with Prayer of Heal. So let's talk about some assignments here. I don't have it all on one nice, easy page. That's what a lot of people are going to have. And the question is how much you do with automatic assignments changing versus what I do is I just have most of the same people that are showing up each week and I don't have a whole ton of assignments. So if one person changes, like if abusement is uh, gone this next week and we have Bran instead, I just replace all with this name change and boom, that one assignment changes. So now that one person I know that was doing the one thing before has changed to the new thing. As long as I have their name consistent throughout, right? So from that, I just do that one by one by one. And the first thing that I'm checking always is the tanks. I make sure that we have our 6 tank assignments all set. And then after the 6 tank assignments are set, I check on the healers. First thing I'm checking here is Patrick. Do I have all 12 healers assigned on Patrick? And then from there, I check for Horsemen. Thaddius doesn't really matter much. Nothing else really matters besides the trash assignments, making sure that healers know their trash assignments. So there's really not that much, right? Like, you're just gonna overthink things a whole ton in your first couple of Naxxes, and just all the levels of detail are really overwhelming. So if you've been in my raids, you know how I don't even worry about KT until we get to KT. You have 3 or 4 minutes in that downtime in phase one. So like again, just focus on one boss at a time as much as you can. In some ways, that's kind of why I like this assignment sheet, even though it's really bad. But I think it is important to have kick assignments for Fairlena trash. I often don't do that, but having a mage on each of the um, red mobs that do casts, as well as then rogues and some warriors to kick there is really good. If you are a raid that lip shouts, you should have some lip shout assignments. Fairlena is one that you just want to make sure you know your tanks are doing the right stuff. Vesuvius is probably something I should have assignments listed for, but I don't. We list out Lotheb in our soft reserve group. In our GDKP, we don't even do that. We take it one step back where we just have the different groups. So in game, you're just looking at your group. Um, Again, I'm really big on keeping things simple. A couple things that you have to have again is that Patrick assignment, making sure that you understand who is healing what on Patrick and that same healer is staying on that same person the entire time. Here on Alliance side, what I like to do is have the main tank again wearing pretty heavy mitigation. They're going to have 4 healers on them. You want to have at least 1 priest on each of the tanks so that they can have inspiration buff as much as possible. Ideally 2 priests is good to have higher chance of that. And then having at least 1 paladin on each of the tanks so they can just spam flash of heal over and over, flash heal over and over, really makes a big difference. So here you see that we have the same soaker on first and second off tank. This is a little bit of a riskier strat, where if one of the tanks dies, it's just 100% wipe when you only have 2 tanks like this in total. But as long as you survive the opener and you have, 8 healers that are paying attention, it is a what I think pretty safe strat as long as this soaker has full mitigation, like absolute chunky gear, able to take two hatefuls. If you're a little bit less certain and want to have in some ways a bit more safety, you then have your third tank here. So take three in this case would be salad. So salad would be the third tank, and then we'd have five healers on that soaker that has a higher health pool, and three healers on the soaker that has less health. Gotta sneeze in a second. Okay, so besides, excuse me. Okay, besides Patrick, Thaddius, it doesn't matter too much besides just making sure that you have six healers on the side that hits harder Stalag. The left side hits harder. So making sure that the four main tanks are in like semi-mit is, I think, worth it. Some pieces of tankier gear and stone shields for that first boss, definitely worth it. Gothic is a boss that I always waste time on when it comes to setting up groups where we have, if you're in groups 1 through 4, you're on the live side, and if you're in groups 5 through 8, you're on dead side, besides a couple exceptions. We always stack heavier on Gothic on live side than we need to because we don't do anything fancy. So we have six healers on each side, and basically all of the melee DPS on dead side besides the rogues and one or two additional DPS plus three tanks. So maybe like five or six melee total. That's more than a lot of groups would do. That means dead side has to play smarter and play safer. We don't shackle though. In uh, a raid where we don't have buffs and we're a little bit weaker, we would be shackling a couple targets on Gothic on the right side. That's not something that we have super set up here in this assignment sheet, besides, like, we could list the priests and have, so again, this says wave 11, 13, 15, and 17 is when we'd be shackling. This is if we don't have buffs and are doing this in a little bit more prog focus. For four horsemen, we six tank it because we burn Mograine. So if we were to seventh tank it, we would need a seventh person and ideally pretty heavy mit or fire resist gear. So that kind of throws then this whole rest of the thing off. So just don't really think about that. Assume that you have Giga Pump and that you're going to be able to kill Mograine reliably. Or not, I don't know, make that third tank and just have that third tank rotation for Mograine. That's just a question of your DPS level, right? If you can one phase Maxna, you can very easily one phase Mograine. So anyways, what we have here is the main tank is probably going to be starting on either Thane or Mograine, just kind of depends. You want heavy threat tanks at the start to be on Ziliak and Thane. Llama don't need to have a whole ton of threat just to be able to rip that away. Same with Mograine. Making sure you get Ziliak away, very important, especially sometimes you're going to have other DPS going in on Ziliak at the start as you get higher levels of DPS power. So just something to think about. After a couple rotations here, we just have like a clockwise rotation. So after Valen would get one mark on Blama, he would go over to Ziliak. And then after getting 3 marks at Ziliak would continue on, just rotation would go on and on and on. So we don't have a whole ton of detail in these instructions and that kind of stuff. KT, pretty simple diagram of where to stand. Just have all these different people listed as healers over here. Not a whole ton of strategy with this besides just making sure that the mages are spread out, making sure that the priests that are assigned to shackle know that they're shackling, and that the other priests know that they are not shackling unless it's absolute disaster. Having paladins able to use turn undead makes it a lot safer for Alliance side. On Horde side, having mages that are able to use Frost Nova can make a really big difference. So just understand how powerful Frost Nova is on KT. Making sure that your mages stay alive for phase 3 makes a huge difference. It's all about mage CC on KT. It's really what makes like the mages such a good class. Okay, so besides that, we have a main tank on each one of the spots here. Not a whole ton of strategy. We often have that diamond tank, so that'd be like tank 2 or 3 starting. I like to not always have the main tank be starting on KT just because after the first mind control happens, your main tank is not going to be tanking anymore and it can get a little bit more hectic. So in the time where you want to try and get threat, it can be the best to have your main tank try and get that threat, right? So just kind of depends your strategy. But ideally, maybe Diamond or X could be starting tanks so that they can just like pull it back quickly and easily. Other than that, I think that having a Paladin do the King spam and have that being at the top here is really good. So we always have Wombeck assigned to spot number 1 there. And we don't normally have someone assigned to spot 19. Yeah, pretty simple. Maybe seems like a lot, but now let's start getting into a lot here. I think that the Phoenix assignment sheet here is kind of interesting where it has a lot of different like ideas and key points for each of them. That can be kind of helpful to get people on the same page. So yeah, I think that this could be helpful if someone wants to try and make their own connection of all this stuff, that feel free. The main takeaway with some of these guides for me is how much do you have to change things versus how much do these assignments automatically change. So like in this one here, we're looking at rays now, retards. So G6, it pulls from Leary from here. So some of these different ones, it's just tough when you're trying to mess with different things and change names and stuff. So having ones that do things automatically as much as possible can be good, but also a lot of times Naxx is just doing stuff on the fly, and dealing with some of these different things in the moments is what makes Naxx so tough. So how much do you do that audibly versus changing things on the sheet? That's just kind of the question of the raid. So in some of these runs that have more high level stuff, they have additional talking points to the side here as far as what they're doing tech wise, of different AoE pulls or higher DPS strats or just more risky stuff. So that's one then, and then we have a horde version here. So in this horde version, we have looks like 6 shamans. I feel like often you see 7. Again, the level of healing in speedruns is just less, right? You have more DPS output, so you need less healing. So typically you're gonna have like 11 healers down to 10. Horde side often has 11 just for more safety, but looks like this group here has 10, so a little bit more on the edge here. So a lot more AoE shout assignments, much more detailed versions of that. Again, instructions here as far as what different tech to use and what consumables are required for that tech. Different speed items. Discussion of Vesuvius, 4 horseman cleave versus non 4 horseman cleave. Patchwork. On Patchwork, they have a lot of the shamans all healing the hatefuls And on the main take, mostly it's two priests and one other shaman. Um, phase 7 here, again, more tech descriptions, different stuff required for tech, instructions for SAF and KT, instructions for SAF polarity. Instructions for Four Horsemen cleave versus non-Four Horsemen cleave. And then final one here was a work in progress. Shout out to Zorkel for setting this up. Basically what you do is you have this initial sheet here, and from this, filling out this roster sheet, it then pulls into this other sheet where you just have to change a couple of these different requirements, and then everything else is automated. So I think this one has a lot of potential. I just haven't ever messed with it enough, but I think it's really good overall. So a couple of different versions, a couple of different talking points as far as what matters, what doesn't. Things like the Gluth kite are another thing that I don't list in my sheet. I don't list the Ignite Tot rotation very well, so yeah, this thing has a lot. Again, it just comes down to the level of what your raid is expecting and what you feel like you need to communicate in your raid. How much is verbal versus visual, and what you think is most important for that. So just giving a little example here. I think that kind of covers it in a nutshell for kind of a mid-range version. We'll go into some more high-level discussions and micro discussions as far as raid leader expectations and stuff like that. But going into assignments here, I think that that is just like a basic level. As far as spores go, I think that mages getting first spore is always good. Besides that, it doesn't really matter much. If you have dagger rogues don't really care about spores because they have higher crit chance with world buffs. Other than that, warriors want it, obviously. That's really it. GG's.